Excellent. Well, thanks, Cheryl, and I'm just sharing my presentation here now. Welcome, everyone, to the Project Intake and Prioritization webinar, which is actually one of 5 in what we're calling the Building Blocks of PPM webinar series. My name is Kenneth Steiness. I'm going to be presenting today, and I'm the managing partner of Sensei Project Solutions. Sensei is a Microsoft partner. We've done a large number of deployments around the country, around the world, and personally I've been doing scheduling for 16, 17 years, and the majority of that time actually with Microsoft Project. So we, in addition to our team being certified on the technology behind Project Server, we also have very much a process focus, so we like to align ourselves with PMI for a lot of the practice standards, and we're embedding some of the industry recommendations from Gartner Group and other industry experts around PPM specifically into the solutions. So how do we help our clients? We do the traditional deployment services, so actually gathering requirements, designing, configuring, deploying Microsoft PPM, and ongoing support to our clients. We do a lot of training, role-based typically, and very much focused on what is the process that I need to do in the system. Am I building a schedule? Am I updating a schedule? Am I a portfolio manager? Am I a team member? Am I a project manager? And so on. And then we also provide a number of different solutions, jumpstart solutions, so this project-in-a-box concept, and report packs as well. And some of what you'll be seeing today are actually samples of work that we've done with clients and some best practices as well. So I mentioned that this is one in a series of 5. So it's really the building blocks of PPM. So let me just explain and set the stage for what that is. The building blocks of PPM really represent the most common business objectives or process areas, if you like, that are the drivers behind most deployments. So our philosophy is that the focus really should be on solving a business problem, not on the technology when we're deploying Microsoft Project and Project Server. So these are the 5 building blocks here, and within these building blocks lie the processes, the procedures, the tools, the techniques, and the configuration options that make up our recommended approach to PPM, and really the heart and soul of what we're calling proactive scheduling. So before I go into each of these boxes here, we're going to open up each of these and just talk about them briefly. But before we do that, let me just explain proactive scheduling very, very briefly with an analogy here. Proactive scheduling, it's really a philosophy and a set of best practices to help project managers build better schedules, to help resource managers, to help executives, and so on in the context of a PPM environment. So the analogy I use is one of printed directions. When I used to travel 5, 10 years ago, I would print directions and take with me. Well, the problem with that is as soon as there's a detour or as soon as I take a wrong turn, that map is no longer an accurate representation of where I'm going. So what I got was a GPS system that helps me track my actual progress, reroutes me if we have detours. It provides real-time information to help me out. You see where this is going, I'm sure. So the analogy related to proactive scheduling is this. If you have a static schedule, you're hard-coding it with dates that are not, that don't reflect reality, and there's no estimates to complete. It doesn't predict completion dates. There's no total cost estimates. It doesn't help you take corrective action and make better decisions. So we really need that GPS system, really need that GPS system that is a proactive schedule that will allow us to do all of that. So back to the building blocks of PPM. So proactive scheduling is the philosophy and the scheduling methodology behind all of this. So I'm going to take just about 30 seconds on each of these boxes here, maybe a minute or so, just to explain what they are, and then we're focusing on the project intake and prioritization box today. So project intake and prioritization, recently in the last 2 to 5 years, this has become a really, really high priority for organizations, and that is to get a handle on all of their proposed projects in a single location and being able to compare apples and oranges, quite frankly, and build a prioritized portfolio that we can rank and select based on strategic alignment, based on resource availability, and so on and so forth. So that really is all about having a single location that's integrated into your PPM system to capture project proposals. Resource capacity demand management is all about understanding what resources we have available in the organization to perform the work, and then holding that up against the demand that we have from existing and incoming projects. So really balancing out, okay, I have 17 FTEs on my development team, but I have a demand of 18 FTEs coming in from projects. Budgeting and cost tracking is all about integrating the upfront budgets and locking down the budget and saving a baseline, and then tracking against that baseline as you're executing your project. There's really a lot of great support in Project Servo to do that today, and it has been in a couple of releases. So again, it's all about being proactive with planning out your costs and then tracking actuals and then updates and variance as you move throughout the project. Project planning and collaboration then is really the core or sort of the traditional Microsoft project on the desktop, and then added with SharePoint for collaboration. But that's all about integrating it all. It's all about integrating the business case, the scope of the project, the budgets, the resources, the deadlines, the constraints, building a good dependency network, and really putting it all together in a schedule that reflects reality and that we can use and trust to make decisions from. Project status and portfolio reporting then says, okay, well, in an ideal situation, we update our project schedules every week or maybe every 2 weeks, depending on your organization, with actual progress, as well as an assessment or a validation of what the remaining effort might be, so we can identify variances and produce an accurate forecast for the remainder of the project. So that's the left-hand side here. When we're working in a Project Servo environment, that information rolls up into portfolio reports, and this is where we're able to manage by exceptions, by tracking key performance indicators. We can identify resource bottlenecks across projects. You might have projects A, B, and C, and individually the projects look fine, but when you're looking at the projects from a portfolio perspective, you may have resource bottlenecks. And we see that a lot when organizations go from MPP files and transition into the Project Servo environment. That's a very, very common one. So the goal here is to provide visibility and insight of the whole portfolio and facilitate better decision making. Okay, so that was the very, very quick introduction to the building blocks of PPM, just to put it in context. Now we're going to talk about, for the rest of the meeting today, we're going to talk about project intake and prioritization specifically. So project intake, as I mentioned, is all about capturing all of the incoming proposals or project requests, if you like, in a single location in an online business case form. Typically, you also want to identify a high-level staffing plan. A lot of times you may want to estimate your costs. You may want to propose start and finish dates if that's important to this particular project. You may want to identify required go-live dates, and you may want to rate the project or the proposed project against the strategic business drivers of the organization. So those are just some examples and some ideas. And I know some of you are going to say, well, but it depends on what kind of project it is, and that's very, very true. There's this concept of enterprise project types. A lot of organizations have started to adopt this today, where they're saying not all projects are created equal. We might have a software development project that they're typically larger initiatives and require maybe a little bit more rigor. Then you might have a small infrastructure update, which is something that we want each department to be able to handle maybe. Then you might have production support if you're managing and allocating resources to production support. And then you might have these basic one-off small project plans. So these are just examples that we use to kind of demonstrate a concept here. So if you think about each of these, software development, infrastructure, production support, and basic project plan, I'm actually going to skip the business drivers for right now. We'll come back to that. And what level of governance we subject those to. A software development project can be a major initiative, and we may want to have a multi-level approval governance process in place. And I'm going to show you what we've built here and explain it a little bit. So the major workflow, if you're doing a software development project, says, let's make sure we have a complete business case, including a problem statement, expected benefits, costs, resource estimate, the whole thing. We want a pretty good understanding of what this particular project is. Then, before it goes to the steering committee or to the PMO, we may want to have a department review. In other words, if I'm in engineering or I'm in IT or marketing and I propose a project, we may want to have the manager of engineering approve it first before we send it to the steering committee. So that's what the second step is here in the major workflow. After it's been approved by the department, then it goes to the steering committee for review and approval. And after it's been approved and selected, then it goes into detailed planning. We're going to focus primarily on these first couple of steps today when we go through this in the tool. But then after the approval, that's when we do our detailed plan. So in other words, when we do the business case, we don't have a schedule yet, typically. We will just have a high-level swag at what resources we need, maybe some projected costs and the business case information, and some key dates. But we may not even have a schedule, probably don't have a schedule at that point. So after steering committee approval, that's when we assign the project manager to go in and do the detailed planning, resource loaded schedule, and prepare the baseline and everything. And then there is a baseline plan review where we assess how close were we. If we said in the business case that this was going to be a $500,000 project, but when we did the detailed planning, it turned out to be a $750,000 project, for example. So we have another option to approve or reject the project here. After that, we go into execution, and at the end, we do a formal sign-off. Did we meet the objectives, and how did we do a post-project review and a formal closeout? So that's the major workflow. Now, this is just a sample. This is a sample that we've built based on having done this with a number of clients. So this merges the best of 20, 30 different deployments where we've actually put these types of workflows in place. Another workflow then is, in the minor workflow here, is much more simple. If you think of an infrastructure update, maybe I have 40 hours worth of work. I'm going to do it over the course of a couple of weeks. I don't really want to send it through the rigors of a steering committee or a PMO approval. So if it falls within this category, maybe it's a simple project request that goes to your manager for review, and then we just start executing on it and we close it out. So it could be as simple as that. It's obviously two very different ones here. All right, so let me go in and show you what that looks like in Project Server in PWA. So this is PWA. I'm going to assume that most of you are somewhat familiar with this. I'm going to switch over to my proposals view. So this particular view just tracks by workflow phase. It tracks my initial proposals and those that are sitting with the steering committee pending approval. Now, we have the ability today with 2010 to go in and request projects online directly in PWA. Most of you are probably aware of that already. And this is where we have these different enterprise project types. So are you requesting, is this a software development project that you're proposing? Is it a production support project schedule? Is it a basic project plan, or is it an infrastructure project? I'm going to just run a quick infrastructure project here so you see the difference between the level of detail that we're required to put in. So we're going to say that we're upgrade to, and we're going to make something up here. We're going to say that we have a new Q wireless router device type. We'll put a detailed description in here, explain what it is I'm trying to do. I think, ideally I'd like to start this on maybe November 1st. And these are my proposed and start and finish dates here. And I think I'm going to be able to finish it by the 7th. And this investment category, this is something else that we're really starting to see a lot of organizations adopt. This whole concept of, does this project help you run the business, grow the business, or transform the business? And we're going to say this one just helps us run the business. And then I'm going to say this is in engineering, for example. Now, again, if you think of that very simple workflow that we looked at a minute ago, and so this is it's called the PDP, the project details page, or the simple business case form, that this is all the information we're submitting, and you could put other things in here. You could put your work estimates in here. You could build a resource plan to support it. It's really entirely up to you. We're going to look at some of that when we get to the major workflow here in just a minute. All right, so it's going to create my infrastructure plan here, and then it's going to give me the option to submit it for approval. And in this case here, yeah, that's gone away. Okay. And actually, this one was submitted for approval directly. So now it's sitting here for department review. And I'm going to open let me open a different tab here just so you can see, refresh this, so we can go back and forth. So now that it's sitting there for department approval, if I'm in the right category, I should be, let me just go back out here for 1 second. It will come into me as a workflow task pending my approval. Go in and say active tasks, and here we go. Upgrade to Q wireless routers approval task. Now I can go in and edit this item. If I already know what it is, I can just go ahead and hit approve, or I can go in and review the project details. Now, when I approve this, it moves it forward in the workflow, and of course, there's email notifications that come along with this. So let me go back over to this guy right here and refresh him. And you'll see that he's now moved forward to execution here. Very, very simple, minor workflow, no big deal. Now we're straight in execution for this project. Okay? Now let's build a different one. Let's actually build a full-blown, a major workflow project, software development, that goes through the formal request approval process, rather. I'm going to come back in here, say new again, and this time I'm going to choose software development. So each enterprise project type can be associated with different business case forms, with different workflows, so you have the ability to scale the level of governance. All right, so I'm going to say that we're going to build Office 2013 app. We want to try and get in that marketplace. I'm going to put in a detailed justification here explaining what it is I'm trying to do. I'm going to say that this is an IT initiative. I'm going to go in and propose some dates here. Now, I think we're going to get started with this. Actually, I'm just typing some dates. I'm planning well ahead here. I'm going to say 05, 01, 2014. This is a grow the business, because I think this is going to really help grow our business. So I'm going to put that as a grow the business investment category. I'm going to say that Bob is my sponsor on this particular project. And now I get to the actual business case portion of it down here. What's the problem statement? What are the expected benefits? Proposal costs, proposed go live, and so on. And if we had more time, I would fill this in detail, but I'm just going to say problem statement here, benefit 1, benefit 2, and so on. And if you'd rather have these be monetized, you certainly can do that. And you can also put make benefits an actual cost field. Proposal cost. What's it going to cost me to do this? Well, I think it's going to cost me $210,000. I'm going to put that in here, and I'd like to see us go live with this particular app on. It's called 04/01/2014. All right. Now this is just our business case form. If you already have a project request form that you're using today, that's typically what we would take and put on this project detail page. So putting your project request form on the project details page allows you to just capture everything online, and when it gets approved, then you're ready to.
Hey Kenneth. Hey Kenneth, your Your screen popped off.
Huh. Very strange. Can you make me presenter again?
Yes. You are presenter, but nothing is showing. So you just need to share again. Somehow your desktop popped off.
Okay. Looks like I got kicked out. Let me go back in here. Bear with me one second.
Sorry about that. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, I'm rejoining the meeting. Bear with me one second.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I am back in. If you want to promote me to
Sure. Mm-hmm.
presenter.
Mm-hmm. It still shows you as a presenter. Let me see. Did you have to pop back in? Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Yes, you are presenter again.
Okay. Coming up. Secondary monitor. Connecting. Okay, you should see it here in just a second. So what we did was we just filled in a very, very simple business case form. That was the first step, but we're not quite done yet. Hopefully you can see my screen now. You'll see the workflow here. I'm at the business case step still. And I've just done the base. Can you see that, Cheryl?
So no loading yet. Okay, and now it says loading.
Okay. Well, let me explain this while it's coming up.
Okay.
So what we just did was we just created sort of that basic business case form. There are a couple more steps that we want to do before we actually submit it, and we want to probably fill in what we think the resource requirements are going to be, and we're going to also just rate it against the organization's business drivers. And I am sharing my screen. Let me see.
So how's everybody else? I'm seeing your screen, Kenneth.
Finally. Okay. Thanks, Bob. Screen back up. Okay. Sorry about that. So here we are with the business case. If I just look at the workflow stages below, you can see this is the workflow we have set up. There's an initial business case that's still in progress, waiting for input. So we're not done with this yet. And then we will eventually submit it for department review, and then eventually submit it for steering committee review, and so on. So these are the detailed steps that you saw earlier too, and that you see up here. So the next thing I want to do is, let me just go through these pages here again. When I go to the next page, in this case it's the same page that loads you, although you could choose a different one. But now some of the fields are mandatory. So because you have a workflow, you can choose to make certain fields mandatory. In other words, if you have a major project, the problem statement becomes mandatory, but the problem statement is not mandatory for an infrastructure project. And then I go to the next page. That's my strategic impact page. This is where we get to rate the project against the business drivers of the organization. And we've kept it very simple here because most organizations have their own. So we have some very basic ones here: expand into new markets and segments, improve customer satisfaction, increase market share, and reduce expense base. You probably have something similar if you have business drivers in your organization. The key here is to make these selections over here on the right-hand side, make them quantifiable. Otherwise, how do you interpret low, moderate, strong, or extreme? So moderate means that we grow revenue from $500,000 to $1 million. So I'm going to say this project is definitely going to help us do that. Is it going to help us improve customer satisfaction score? No, not really. It's not going to have an impact on that. Is it going to help us increase market share? Yeah, it's going to have a little bit of an impact, probably less than 1% though. And is it going to help us reduce expense base? No, it's not going to have an impact on that either. So that's the next step here. Now I want to actually just add some resources here. So I go to my resource plan. Oh, sorry, let me just save first. So I save that. And I now want to just put some high-level resource estimates in here. What we like to do is typically request resources by their role in the organization or by team. So you're not requesting named individuals, but you certainly can. So here are all the resources in my organization, and I'm going to say that I know I need a business analyst, and I know I need a developer. So I'm going to say business analyst, and I'm going to scroll down and say developer, add those on the right-hand side here, and save and close. All that does is put these resources or these roles rather on my team. And then I want to tell the system that I'm going to use this resource plan to calculate my resource utilization. So in other words, you have the option of either calculating from this screen or calculating from your MPP file, your project schedule file, I should say. And right now we don't have a project schedule. So resource plan it is. And I'm going to set my date. I think we said we're doing really well with long-term planning right now. So I'm going to say January through May of 2014. And I'm going to show my time scale. I'm going to show months just to make it a little bit more manageable. And I'm going to enter my information in FTEs. I could enter it in hours. I could enter it in days. I could enter it in FTEs here. So I know that for the first couple of months I'm going to need at least a couple of business analysts, and then probably scale back to one in the third month, and then a half, 50% of somebody's time in the fourth month. Developers are not going to ramp up till the second month. We're going to have half an FTE in February, maybe one here, two here, three here, and so on. And you'll notice that the booking type here is by default proposed, because this project, first of all, the project hasn't been approved yet, but also generic resources can't do any work, roles can't perform any work, so they should always be set to proposed by default. I'm going to save this. I'm going to publish that as well so that it hits my resource availability, and close out of that. All right. So now I've entered my business case form. I've rated my proposed project against our business drivers, and I've built a resource plan. Now I'm going to go ahead and submit it for approval. So I'm submitting this for approval, and then it moves into the first approval step there. Give that a second. Workflow, request initiated. There we go. Now you'll see the project is currently waiting for approval. The approvers are, so it looks like Diane Masters is the approver for this particular one. And I can see in my workflow status below that it is in fact in progress waiting for approval. So there's nothing more that I can do right now as the requester. And then if I was approving this, I would be doing the same thing I did earlier. I would receive an email notification if I'm Diane. I would go in and I'd look at this request and I would approve it on behalf of the department, and then we'd go on to the next step of steering committee. But there's another way to look at this. So let me switch over here to reports. There's another way to go in and look at this, and that's just to pull up a report that shows me all of my proposed projects. So here's a project proposal by governance phase. Now, we only have about 12, 15 projects in here, but you can imagine an organization with 50 or 100 or 200 or 300 new projects every quarter or every year that this list could get fairly long. So what this is telling me is that I have 65,000 hours worth of work being proposed in the proposal workflow stage, and 68,000 hours worth of work in the selection. So that's a lot of incoming work. Have a total of $1.5 million worth of projects sitting in the proposal workflow phase, and I have 1.355 sitting in the selection workflow phase. And you can see the data is down here. What you can also see is how long something has been pending. How long has this been sitting here? How many days has this been in this phase? Estimated cost and the hours for each of these projects here. So there are some pretty big initiatives in here as well. Okay. Now, if I am, imagine there was 50 or 100 here, and I'm a sponsor in this organization, I would just want to come in and see maybe my own. So I'm going to select the filter on the left-hand side, and these are called slicers if you haven't worked with these before. These are slicers in Excel 2010. So I would say, okay, I just want to see where I am the sponsor. And now we see these 3 projects here. So my the projects that I'm sponsoring are worth $725,000 and it's 27,000 hours worth of work. If I was Glenn, I would click on the slicer for Glenn, and I would see that I have 30,000 hours worth of work and 605,000, and so on. Let me clear that filter real quick. So this is a really great way of getting an overview of your funnel, right? Your project intake funnel, essentially. I can also look at the owner who submitted these projects. I can also look at it by department. Which ones do we have in engineering? And filter out to just show engineering proposed projects. And I could do IT and see which ones we have in IT. So just a great way to get an overview here. Similarly, I can look at it by investment category, grow, run, transform. Okay? All right. Let's see here. Okay. Now, at this point, we could continue to move this forward, and eventually, when all of our projects have been approved by the departments, we're going to want to do portfolio analysis. Let's just go ahead and run portfolio analysis and take a look at that. So portfolio analysis takes a big picture view of all of the incoming proposed projects. And again, I'm a little bit early here, but I'm going to say this is my 2014 portfolio analysis. And you can choose to do it one department at a time, or you can do it across departments for the whole organization. I'm going to do it across the whole organization. It's going to ask you what your prioritization type is. What that means is, how are you going to decide which projects are more important? And there was actually a slide that I skipped a minute ago. Let me pull that slide up and pull it over here. If you look on the bottom right of this slide here, this is actually where that data comes from. The executives got together and said, we have these 4 business drivers: increase market share in existing markets, expand into new markets, improve customer satisfaction, and reduce expense base. They got together and decided that the most important of these is increasing market share in existing markets by 61%, then expanding into new markets, then improving customer satisfaction, then reducing the expense base. So you can imagine a project that comes in and is really has a high impact on reducing expense base is not going to rank as well as a project that comes in that helps us increase market share in existing markets. So that's where those numbers come from. So that's the executive's consensus here. Now the next thing I want to do is actually select my projects. Now if you were a stickler for doing it right, we would only select these ones here, but I want a little bit more data, so I'm going to select all of the ones that are either being proposed, have not yet gotten department approval, or that have gotten department approval and are pending steering committee approval. I'm going to select all of them. I'm going to add those here, say these are the ones I want to approve, do analysis on. Those that are in the planning phase or execution phase, I don't worry about right now. The next question is, how do you want to measure for costs? I'm going to use the proposal cost that we entered earlier that you saw. And do you want to do resource planning? Absolutely. I definitely want to do resource planning. And I'm going to say that we're doing 2014 from January to December. Which resource custom field do we want to use? I get this to stick. I want to use the role. You could either optimize by department, by team, by role, and so on. I'm going to choose the role here. That just means that we're looking for over-allocation by role, essentially. Am I going to filter? No, I'm going to look at all resources. What about other work that's sitting in the portfolio outside of this analysis? Do we want to look at just committed work or also committed and proposed? And I'm going to say we're only going to look at committed assignments at this point. And that's good enough. Let me go ahead and save this guy. So there are 4 steps to this process. That's going to come up here in just a second up top. The first one is reviewing how the projects have been prioritized. Let me do this. Refresh this for 1 second. Okay. Go back in. Sorry about that. The first thing we can do is review how the projects have been prioritized. So if you remember, we set the Build Office 2013 app, and we said that would have a moderate impact on expanding into new markets. It would grow revenue from $500,000 to $1 million. No impact on improving customer satisfaction, low impact on increasing market share, and so on. As a steering committee or as the PMO team, you can now sit down and review these and say, these are the proposed projects. Do we believe these ratings are appropriate? Do we believe these are correct? And you can review them and say, you know what, I think this is a little bit optimistic to say that this has a strong impact. I think we should change it to low or moderate and so on. So you can actually do that for this analysis alone. But this is where we all agree on whether we've rated each project correctly. Based on how we rated those and based on the executive consensus, then we get a prioritized list of projects. The most important project in this portfolio is developing this engine sensor analyzer for the 2015 autos. And it ranks at 13.61% business value. So out of these 15 projects here, however many we have, this one gives us 13.61% business value. You'll see the one on the bottom here, these custom filters for antivirus software, not a very strategic project, 0.8% business value. And so if you get the idea, if money wasn't an issue, resources are no issue, then we would just start with this first project and work our way through the list. Now, let's go to the next step and start measuring against our costs here. So we're going to say, okay, so to do all these projects, there are 14 projects. To do these 14 projects, it's going to cost us $2.875 million. Well, maybe our budget is $2 million. Let's recalculate with a $2 million budget. So for $2 million, I can do 10 out of the 14. It's basically doing, it's basically saying, I'm going to take the highest priority project, hold it up against the proposal cost, and then those that are relatively low value but high cost, I'm going to move them out. Take this one here, for example, the defect tracking system upgrade. Granted, it's 3.87%, which is not bad, but it's costing us $350,000. If I look up here, I have a project up here that's 4.36% business value, but is only cost me $185,000. So just looking at it like that, that probably makes more sense to do. You'll notice that my Build Office apps didn't make the cut. It's pretty expensive and doesn't provide that much business value. Now, you always have the option of saying, well, you know what, we really need to do this one. This is something that our CEO feels really strongly about, so I'm going to force it in. So we force this one in, and then we ask the system to recalculate. So it's going to move that project, the defect tracking project, it's going to move that above the line. But the cost of doing so is that it's moved these two projects out. If you see over here highlighted in red, it's moved out, developed the HOPO report module and integrate version 7. Those two projects have now been moved out. I can't do them anymore because I forced this one in. So right now I can do 9 projects, get 87% of the business value. Let me go ahead and save this. I'll save this as my $2 million budget plus 1 project forced in. And you can save as many of these as you like and do comparisons and what have you. Now, I do want to just look at one other thing before we leave this screen, and that's the strategic alignment on the left-hand side. Remember we said that increasing market share was the highest priority of the business by 61.51%. Well, that's great, but we're only spending 28% in this portfolio. We're only spending 28% of our of the proposal costs to actually meet this particular goal. So it looks like we might not be walking the talk here. There's a little bit of a discrepancy here. But that's something that we can then address and go back and revisit if we're doing the right projects. All right. Let's look at resources here. I want to leave some time for questions here in a minute, so let me just see if I can do this in 5, 6, 7 minutes. So we could do 9 projects based on the funding we have. Now let's look at how many projects we can do with the resources we have. Let me move this over a little bit. It looks like, it looks like I can only do 5 projects. These 5 projects right here, these are the only 5 I can staff. And these 4 have been moved out because we don't have resources. Well, that's not good. Let me look at what's causing that. Let me look at my requirements details here. So we want to look at where we have bottlenecks. So I'm going to collapse up the selected projects because they're not really relevant for this conversation. And I'm just going to look at the projects that were not selected. And let's look at the first project here, Colorado Website Design and Rollout. You'll see that May and June are highlighted. So that means we have, check this up here too. May and June are highlighted. It means we have a resource deficit. And specifically, I can see that I'm short on infrastructure developers. I can also see that I'm short on a technical writer. I can see that on this project down here, I'm also short technical writers. And the next project, I'm short a marketing person. The next project, I'm short technical writers again. So there seems to be a bottleneck for technical writers right around the May, June timeframe. So I wonder what if I move this project out, generic table credit card reader. Let me see if I can do that. Let's go back over here. So we've identified the roles, infrastructure developer, technical writer, and a marketing resource. So this project right here is scheduled to start in March. What if I move it to July? If I was to push this project out to July, could we fit it in? And that's just eyeballing it. And sure enough, if we move it to July, then we can fit it in. So then we'll have to ask the question, is this acceptable? And let's say it's acceptable for now. But I'd still like to do 1 or 2 more projects here. Actually, let me pop out and show you a report. Now, this report I'm actually going to cover in more detail in the next webinar, but I do have some supporting reports here that will tell me where I have bottlenecks. So let me load this up and collapse this guy. All right. So let's look at, what was it, May and June? Let's look at May and June in 2014 right out here. Sure enough, we're short 622 hours for infrastructure developer time, 128 hours in June. We're short product testers here. We're short technical writers by quite a bit. So we can see that we're short. We have an over-allocation of technical writers, infrastructure developers, product testers, project managers, and so on. So that's just validation of what we were just looking at. But I'll cover that more in our next webinar. All right, so now I've looked at that. Now let's say I'd like to see if I can get this project done. So what if I could hire 3 people? If I could hire 3 people, what kind of impact would that have on my ability to execute projects? Well, it looks like it only moved 1 project in. Let me try 4. Oh, not 47, 4. No, same thing. All right. So hiring 3 or 4 people only allows me to do 1 more project. So let me see who I should hire. So I should hire 2 infrastructure developers, 1 for the Colorado website project and 1 for the Sabertooth network project. And I should hire a technical writer for the Colorado website project to start in May and June respectively. And here's what it's going to cost me based on these number of hours and these rates here. So that's a good indication of, okay, do you want to hire 3 more people? Here's what you need to hire. Here's who you need to hire, and so on. So it gives me a lot of great information here. Okay, let me go back over here. Okay. Oh, one last thing. So once I'm done, I'm going to go back to my Gantt chart here. Once I've decided that this is what I'm going to do, then I want to save this as my 2014 final portfolio. All right? And then I can actually go ahead and commit this portfolio. I'm not going to do that today, but if you commit this portfolio, it will approve these in the workflow, or it can, if that's how you set it up, and it'll move them forward for the next detailed planning workflow step. And now you need to go in and replace the generic resources with named individuals. You need to build a detailed project schedule and prepare the baseline plan and so on and so forth. Okay. So let me come back over here. Okay. Just real quick, before we open up for questions here, just want to, if you're interested in joining the conversation and seeing some of our upcoming webinars or hear more about proactive scheduling, please join us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, or if you're interested in any information from the session today, feel free to email us at info@senseiprojectsolutions.com. I'm going to leave this screen up for just a minute before we take questions. And I have not been following the conversation. So, Cheryl, are there any questions from the audience?
Yeah, so I think one, and maybe you could just go back to show the screen. How do you indicate generic resources for each of those projects that flowed into the portfolio analysis? And you did that on the projects, but maybe just show that one more time.
Yeah. So there's a trend now to where we're not even building a project schedule until we've gotten initial approval. So these projects here, these are proposals, and one's ready for selection. You'll see there's a resource plan column here. These all say yes. That means we've built a resource plan, not a project schedule, but a resource plan. So if I highlight this guy right here and say, show me my resource plan, it will say, okay, this project here, you said that you need a business analyst, product tester, project manager, system tester, and technical writer, and you need this is listed in FTEs right now, but if I switch this to hours, for example, it'll show me how many hours I need. I need a business analyst for 124 hours in March. I need a product tester for 124 hours. I need a project manager for 99 hours, and so on. And those are selected from the build team option right here. So I build my team and say, these are the types of resources I need, and this is a high-level swag, high-level estimate for how much of their time I'm going to need. Does that answer the question?
Yes. There was also a question on, you've shown several really great reports, and just are those really out of the box, or how do people get those reports?
Yeah, great question. So with 2010 and Excel services, let me just go into business intelligence here. What comes out of the box is a set of really great sample reports and templates, and these are not all samples, but there are some sample reports in here for top projects, simple project lists, and they're really intended to be starting points that you can work from. So that definitely comes out of the box. What we've done is, in addition to that, we've actually created a number of reports based on the philosophy of proactive scheduling and the building blocks of PPM. So there's actually probably about a dozen or so reports total, including the project proposals by governance phase. So that's one we built. And project status report, portfolio status report, and those I'm showing in a subsequent webinar. So there's a little bit of both. Some of it's out of the box, and some of it's products that we've built and that we actually sell.
Very cool. Are there any other questions? So one of the things, Kenneth, maybe you can, what would be the specific way for people to, we can send out your slides or the recording? What would be your preference on how we do that?
So we're hosting the recording in our YouTube channel, and we can send out the presentation. If anybody wants the presentation, go ahead and send an email to info@Sensei Project Solutions. Then you can get it there. But we will send out an email to everybody with a link to the recorded presentation as well. Yeah, Tom, happy to share the slide deck.
Yeah.
In fact, if most people want it, we can just send it out to everybody.
Yeah.
So you'll get a follow-up email with a link to the presentation. It'll be a day or two before we get it and upload it, but it'll be this week. It'll be the next couple of days.
Yeah, and there was a comment, so there will be that lag in the recording. I'll see if I can't get the MTC, or we'll see if we can't correct that in the recording.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Let me see here. Higher resource roles. Okay, it looks like Chad's been answering the questions. Thank you, Chad. Appreciate it. A couple of people typing. Let's just see if we have one more question coming in before we hang up. Praveen, we can't hear you, so please type your question here.
Well, I can see if maybe he's still muted.
How much time to build the workflow? Well, that's a good question, Tom. There are really three different levels of workflow if you think about it. There is the manual, what I call the manual workflow, which has no automation. It's just a manual set of steps. You need to build that regardless of whether you do any automation. Then there is what I call a linear workflow, and then there's a custom workflow. What you looked at today was that medium level, that mid level of a linear workflow. It's not that complicated, and I can say that because Chad built it, but it uses the Solution Starter from Microsoft, the Workflow Solution Starter, and you can build it right in SharePoint. Everything you saw today was built right in SharePoint with the Solution Starter, and yes, you can put your graphical representation in there with that, Praveen. And if you want more information about that, send a specific question to the info email box, and I'll have Chad or someone else get back to you on that. FTEs required to oh God, that's a tough question. FTEs required to support. Are you talking about the administration CL? Okay, so we like to try and automate as much as possible. The level of administration required is going to depend on how many changes you have. If you have a good, mature process, you really should need very little admin time. But if you find that you have a lot of people coming and going and you have changes to views and custom fields and updates to reports, then it could be a full-time job to be an admin in EPM 2010. There was a question here about proposed resources. Yes, Christine, the proposed resources feature, let me actually just show you that real quick here. The proposed resource feature is, for each resource, you get to choose what the booking type is, whether it's proposed or committed. And when you assign a resource to a project, you choose proposed or committed. Let me go back into my resource plan, and I'm just going to select a named individual, because those by default are committed in our environment, but you get to choose it, of course. I'm going to choose Albert. I'm going to add Albert to my project. And you'll see Albert here has a default booking type of committed. Now, I can change that. I can change that to proposed if I'm not ready to commit Albert to this project yet. So you can switch back and forth between proposed and committed. And what it does is it hides all of these assignments from Albert until the project has been approved and we commit Albert to that particular project. Christine, does that answer your question? How do you so, Tom, that's a great question. Tom, how do you indicate how many generic resources you have in the resource center? Well, there's two ways to go about it. You can either say 0% availability, which means because those people can't do work, or you can match it, the percentage, the max units, to the number of people you have in your organization. Yes, Christine, it can be done in Microsoft Project 2010. I'll pull that up while I talk here. So, Tom, the other way to go is, if I look up here, let me show you. For my infrastructure developer has zero, the generic role has zero availability because a generic resource can't do any work. So you'll see here the DBA is at 0, and then when we assign work to that role, it goes negative because this work has to be assigned to someone else somewhere in the organization. And hopefully that answers that question. Christine, let me see if I can pull up project here. I don't have a good schedule. You can do it in the resource sheet. In the resource sheet, you can insert a booking type custom field. So if I had, and this really only works in Project Server, but that's really where it makes a difference. but I can choose whether Kenneth is proposed or committed right here. You can also do it on the build team dialog. When you build your team from enterprise, you get that option in there as well. Okay, we have a few minutes left, so if there are no more questions. Well, thank you very much, everyone, and go ahead, Cheryl.
No, we appreciate everybody's time, and send your questions to info@, senseiprojectsolutions.com.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.